Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for staying for the last two presentations. Next up to talk about their business and future plans is American Uranium, which trades on the ASX under the symbol AMU and on the OTCQB market under the symbol AMUIF. Thanks to Bruce Lane, Executive Director, for joining us to tell us more about the company.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks to OTC and for David from Veriathis for hosting the event. And thanks for sticking around to listen to our story. So we're, as Stephen said, ASX listed projects all in the US, and we've been operating here since around 2019. I won't go through the disclaimer, but I'm not providing financial advice, and please consider the disclaimer carefully. So we've got projects in Utah and Wyoming. We started off back in 2019 in Utah with our Henry Mountains projects. They're located pretty close to Anfield Shooter and Canyon Uranium Mill and not too far from Energy Fuels, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we moved on and acquired some projects in the Great Divide Basin and at Green Mountain, both through acquisition and a bit of staking. And then we found our Lohuma project, which was based on a large suite of historical data from back in the 1970s. So we digitized that data and then have had 3 seasons of drilling, and we've gotten to a resource so far of a little over 8.5 million pounds. So our Lohuma project's very much our lead project, and that'll be the focus of the talk today, but I will touch on the other projects briefly. I won't dwell too much on the background of what's happening with the growth and demand for energy. I think most of you in the room are probably very well informed about the fact that the demand for electricity has gone up significantly and is projected to go up a lot. Part of that is AI data center driven, but there's obviously a lot of electrification going on. And also the thematic around grid stability, and in particular what nuclear does with its spinning capacity to help manage grid frequency. So those are a couple of key themes, and probably the main reason why President Trump declared a national energy emergency back in 2025. So there's a lot of initiatives on this chart that have been put in place by the Trump administration. I won't go through all of them in detail. I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of them already. I think if we look at the last one, Project Vault, big commitment to buying critical minerals, of which uranium is one, now on the critical minerals list, or back on the critical minerals list. The other one I'd highlight there is the commitment to build large-scale nuclear reactor plants with Westinghouse, $80 billion. So there's talk about SMRs and talk about data centers, but we're really focused on the fact that the US has a very large gigawatt scale nuclear reactor fleet, the largest in the world, 94, 95 reactors, and is now finally going to start building new reactors. We don't really need new reactors for our story. The main story is, and I'll flip through this, that the US consumes around 50 million pounds of uranium every year, and that is obviously projected to grow. But at the moment, the US is only producing last year, produced around 1.5 million pounds. That is growing. There are uranium plants and mills back in business, and a number of them are very close to where our projects are. But that's the gap, and that was the reason why back in 2018, 2019, we looked at the US and said, somebody's got to get more uranium out of the ground domestically in the United States, and that there was an opportunity for us to fund that activity and invest in US projects from Australia. So our projects, as I said, Wyoming, Lohuma is our lead project, and on this slide, and I will refer to it, you'll see that it is right in the middle of that map, very close to Casper in Wyoming, about 40 minutes away, and about 10 miles away from the largest permitted in-situ recovery uranium mine in the US, owned by Cameco at Smith Ranch Island. Our other projects down in the Great Divide Basin are very close to where UR Energy is currently operating at their Lost Creek uranium mine. And then a little below Casper, there's a project there called the Shirley Basin Project, owned by UR Energy. It's currently in the process of being commissioned. So that is the only brand new uranium mine being built in the US. All of the other operations are restarts or brownfields projects that are being rebooted based on the fact that uranium price has gone up. And I think I just read on X that the long-term uranium price is now sitting at $90. So it's been steadily increasing through the last number of years, in particular the last 9 months. And what that has meant is that this business is now being rebooted after being dead in the water since the megatons to megawatts program. Back in the day, the US in the 80s used to produce 44 million pounds a year. So you can see the industry's been dormant for a long time. What we're saying is it's coming back to life based on the price, fundamentally, but also all the support programs being put in place. Our other projects in Wyoming are in the Green Mountain Great Divide Basin area. We've got some resources here, 1.66 million pounds, and an exploration target of between 6 and 10 million pounds at this point. We've done drilling for a couple of seasons here, but we've really diverted all our focus to our Low Herma project because it's the largest and because it's the closest to development. We've got some good prospect activity at Green Mountain, about 12 miles of trend, but it's permitted, but we haven't put a drill hole into it because we focused all our investment in Low Herma. We've also got these projects in Utah, 35 miles away from the Shooting Canyon mill, which Anfield are currently working to put back into business, and about 120 kilometres away from Energy Field's White Mesa mill, which is the largest conventional uranium mill in the US, and it's in fact the only operating conventional uranium mill in the US. I realise I probably haven't talked about in situ recovery mining. I haven't got a slide on it, but essentially in situ recovery mining is undertaken by drilling holes into the ground, and we're trying to access a subterranean ore body that sits in an aquifer. We inject a leach solution into it. It then liberates the uranium. The liquor is brought to the surface and then put over an ion exchange plant. The resin beads then have the uranium extracted from them, precipitated, dried, and then put in a drum to become yellow cake. So 60% of the world's current uranium is produced that way, out of Kazakhstan, in the US, and Texas, and Wyoming, in Australia, particularly South Australia. So it's not a new thing. It's been happening since the 1970s in Wyoming. All of these plants around us are all in situ recovery. So the Low Herma project is, as I said, about 45 minutes from Casper. Casper's 60,000 people, airports, all of those things. It's a large town with oil and gas servicing, big coal business. And some of you will know that Wyoming is the second largest energy production state in the US after Texas. So the landscape where we are is actually quite industrialized. We've got a very large wind farm, and we've got oil and gas facilities, good roads and infrastructure all around us. As I said, we've got a resource there. 32% of that 8.57 million pounds is at indicated level, with a substantial exploration target, which we are working on at the moment. So we are currently drilling in Wyoming, and we will be for at least the next 2 weeks. I think we put out a release this morning with some results from the first 5 holes in that program. And just to, I guess, hone in on where we're drilling at the moment. So we've done a scoping study, an internal scoping study. And so we have planned mine units, we have a flow sheet, we've done engineering work, metallurgy, hydrogeology. And so what we're doing is trying to expand the footprint of the resource at the moment with this drilling to the north of both the planned mine units 1 and mine unit 2. I think I've referred to the fact that we've had positive studies already. What we're doing with this drilling, trying to make the resource bigger, then the next stage is to do infill drilling, some more hydrogeological work to further test the aquifer over a larger area so that we can put that through into permitting. And then hopefully we'll have a scoping study out in Q3 of this year, which will give us the ability to talk about the financial and the production forecasts on the project. Just to illustrate the infrastructure, the chart in the middle, or the image in the middle is the roads, and then the one on the right is electricity. So we have electricity to the boundary. We've positioned the site where we would plan to build a plant close to where we have road access and electricity. So the infrastructure costs are very modest for a project like this. We have a flow sheet which is, in ISR terms, very conventional. There's nothing exotic about what we're doing here. Looks very much like Cameco's flow sheet from 10 miles to our east. From a timing point of view, our estimate is that if we were funded and everything goes according to plan, we could be in production in 29 or 30. But bearing in mind that we haven't produced the scoping study yet and provided forecasts, but that's our internal estimate of how long it would take to get into production. And that marries nicely with where the supply and demand really divert for uranium. Once the reactor life extensions and restarts really start to kick into gear, and some of the existing mine supply around the world really starts to taper off. So 2030 looks like a good time to be targeting production. So just to put in perspective the economics of the potential economics of the project, the second from top row is the Shirley Basin project, which is the one I said is in construction at the moment. It's 8.8 million pounds. That's a declared resource. It was the UR Energy commenced construction from a PEA study. They've provided $40 million capex in their study, and that doesn't include the back-end precipitation, drumming and drying, because they're taking the resin beads across to their Lost Creek plant and doing that part there. So we think that's about $10 million in addition. So if we were to construct a project, it may be in that range, $50 to $60 million worth of capital, plus maybe some sustaining capital, but it provides an NPV for them under their study at an $82 to $86 uranium price of $120 million with an IRR of 83%. Bearing in mind that, as I've just said, the long-term uranium price is already being quoted as $90. We think there's some headspace in there. The Gas Hills project, which is probably about 50 miles away from where we are, also, you can see the NPV and the IRRs are very positive for a project of a similar scale to the project that we have at Low Herma. So whilst I can't give you our financial forecast right now, that's what our objective is to develop a project of that ilk. So looking forward at our news flow and the catalysts, as I said, resource drilling underway at the moment, interim resource update by the end of March. Then we would have another phase of drilling during Q2, which is our infill drilling. We're likely to get an increase in resource through that as well. And then we would have another resource update around Q3. Some more metallurgical and hydrogeological work to be undertaken, and then a scoping study published in Q3. That's the objective. And from there, we can really get started on the mine permitting process. So before I finish, I just want to reflect on how to think about valuation of the company. At the moment, we are trading at around $13 million US market cap, 18 million Australian or thereabouts, depending on what day it is. And we have 10 million pounds, just over 10 million pounds of resources. That's without our update coming. So it gives you $1 per pound of uranium valuation in the region of, $1 or a little bit over. Bearing in mind that uranium now appears to have a $90 a pound long-term price, there's a big disparity. Now, clearly, we've got more work to do. We need to put a study on the project. We need to show the economics. But, I think there's a lot of intrinsic value in the company that's not in our market cap at the moment. To give you an idea, UR Energy has a market cap of around $500 million. They've got a £2 million per annum capacity plant at Lost Creek, and the Shirley Basin plant will be around 800,000 to £1 million per annum. They're getting, $30 or $40 a pound valuation in their market cap. Clearly, they're a producer. Clearly, they've got customers. They are much more advanced than we are, which is why I don't put them on this chart as a comparison. But that's the potential for a company like ours, is to grow into being something like UR Energy. A couple of other things to note on the slide. Premier Uranium acquired Nuclear Fuels, which has a project quite just up the road from us at KC. That was concluded late last year. And then Snow Lake Energy have acquired GUE, Global Uranium Enrichment, they were in JV with immediately abutting us to the north on the Pine Ridge project. So Snow Lake now control that project 100%, and they also have taken a 9.9% stake in our company. Sorry? I don't know. I couldn't possibly comment. Look, there's 3 transactions here which I point to. Consolidation is part of the future for uranium. I think to try and consolidate skills and execution around projects, clearly you want the best projects to be with the best teams. How that all occurs, nobody really knows, but it is a potential future for the company. Our objective at this stage clearly is just to continue to add intrinsic value to the project, to take it as further along the path to permitting and development. And we believe we're moving into an environment where these projects will get funded and get built. 107 million shares on issue. Share price is hovering around 17, 18 Aussie cents, so it moves around a little bit, but not much. We had cash of $1.9 million at the end of the December quarter. We're obviously spending that on drilling at the moment. Don't know what else I can really tell you about that slide that isn't self-obvious. I'm open for questions. I'll try and answer the one about Frank buying more, but I can't. So. Well, they're also a significant shareholder, our strategic stake. Yeah. And it's a very fair question, but I just can't answer it.
No, listen, Gabby Carrera, Spartan Capital. I think it's a great putting that as comparable because it puts the idea in my head, and that's the first thing I thought.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. Let me give you the microphone.
The problem I think that US investors have with ASX listed companies in the uranium sector is that you think ASX company, Australian uranium assets, huge, but will never be developed. But you're actually an ASX listed company with US assets. How do you differentiate your story and explain to US investors that although we're an ASX listed company, we actually have US assets, not Australian assets?
Well, we went through a process 6 months ago, or back in August, to change our name, partly for that reason, to make it absolutely 100% clear that we are an American-focused company, and we've been operating here since 2019. Beyond that, the logical thing to do is be listed here, and so clearly being, cross-trading on the OTC is a step in that direction. So, I think what we're looking at is an evolution here and a path, and it may be that the company should be listed on the NYSE Amex, for instance, at the appropriate time. But we haven't, we don't have concrete plans to do that, but that is a possibility. So I think it's a very roundabout way of answering your question, but I think being here in the market and talking to investors is really the key way to do that, is to, explaining to people that we have a presence here, we've had a presence here, we didn't just turn up last week because it was fashionable, and that we have directors based here, we have all our operations are here. So look, hopefully that makes us investable to some of the conversations that we had earlier. But we're certainly not the finished article in that respect. We've got more to do, which is part of the reason why I'm here. Thanks for your question.
Any other questions from the studio audience? John, online?
Hey, so Bruce, we have a question about the your annual production and mine life projections for Loharima, and how does that compare to other U.S. uranium projects?
Great question. So I think I should start by saying that we do not have a JORC compliant scoping study, so we can't provide forecasts, financial or production forecasts. So that's the compliance line. Having said that, if you look at the size of the deposit, and if you look at analogous projects around us, you've got Lost Creek, which is probably slightly larger, but the production plant has I think a license capacity of around 2 million pounds a year. The bore field at Lost Creek, and look, I'm not sure exactly what their current license capacity is, but it may be around, say, 1 million pounds a year. Shirley Basin, probably around 800,000 pounds a year. So if we think loosely in that sort of 800,000 to 1 million pounds, uprating the plant incrementally costs money, but it's only incremental expenditure. So it could be larger if the deposit was larger. But let's think about 1 million pounds a year, 800,000 to 1 million. And to put that into perspective, that's 2 reactors, almost 2 reactors, or about 2 reactors supply for a year out of US's 94, 95 reactors.
There's another question asking about how you're engaging today with utilities and government buyers, and what do you see as the timeline for contracts or strategic reserve sales?
So it's still early for us to be contracting or even engaging with utilities. We know that the demand is there. There will be a point, and it's probably beyond our scoping study, after our scoping study, we can really start to engage with utilities or government buyers. Having said that, the Defence Procurement Act Consortium is currently underway, and we're a member of that. We're a member of the Uranium Producers of America, the key lobbying group in Washington. So we are involved in that process, but it is early days on that process. So who knows what will come out of that. Suffice to say, the government is looking for procurement of uranium from various sectors. So nothing yet, nothing I can talk about. It's something for the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for presenting, Bruce Lane, American Uranium.
Thanks, everyone.